Thing is, I gotta be pretty quiet at this hour of the night, so we're gonna go with the ASMR vibes. It is what it is. The Mr. Wolf scene in Pulp Fiction is the best example I know of in any movie of clear, direct, effective communication when something needs to happen under a critical time constraint. Obvious disclaimer, I hope obvious. This is a movie. This is a movie about gangsters. They're talking about burying a body, getting rid of a body. So I'm not saying you should follow this exact language we see here, but the techniques and the methods of structuring the communication are universally applicable, even if the actual style might have to differ. So I'll break down Mr. Wolf's communication into 6 points and I'll take them one by one. Number 1, restating expectations. It might sound obvious, but it isn't obvious. The first thing he does when he arrives on the scene is re-clarify that what he knows is what these guys know.
You must be Jules, which would make you Vincent. Let's get down to brass tacks, gentlemen. If I was informed correctly, the clock is ticking. Is that right, Jimmy?
100%.
Your wife, Bonnie, comes home at 9:30 in the a.m., is that correct?
Uh-huh.
I was led to believe if she comes home and finds us here, she wouldn't appreciate it none too much.
You wanted that.
All right, that gives us 40 minutes to get the fuck out of Dodge. Which, if you do what I say, when I say it, should be plenty. Now, you got a corpse in a car, minus a head in a garage. Take me to it.
It would have been easy for him to assume that the information he had been given ahead of time on the phone was the same information these guys have, and they're all thinking about the same thing. That would have been a major mistake. He restates the key expectations to make sure everyone's talking about the same thing and everyone is on the same page. 2, navigating ambiguity. And this is kind of the overarching theme. The core problem is that he has to come up with a plan and communicate that plan to Jules and Vincent about doing a good enough job in the limited time they have available. This is where the ambiguity comes from. What is good enough? What are the things they should focus on and the things they should ignore? So defining this good enough in a timely manner through communication is the main challenge. This is navigating ambiguity. And he does it with all the tools and techniques we're going to discuss in this video. 3, language. He uses simple, everyday words that are very hard to misunderstand.
About the car, is there anything I need to know? Does it stall? Does it smoke? Does it make a lot of noise? Is there gas in it? Anything?
Aside from how it looks, the car's cool.
Positive. Don't get me out there on the road and find out the brake lights don't work.
Hey man, as far as I know, the motherfucker's tip top.
And this is something I say to everyone who asks me. In any situation you can think of, always use the simplest possible language that will work for that situation. Never use a fancy word when a simple word will suffice. Never use a complicated expression when a simple expression will suffice. We never say things like, tonight's nourishment was satisfactory for my taste buds. We say the food was good, because it makes sense. But somehow at work, we sometimes say things that are equivalent to tonight's nourishment was satisfactory for my taste buds. I don't know why. I mean, I do have an idea why. But the point is, don't. Use the simplest possible language you can use. Clarity and details. This is a very important aspect of good communication for any leader, for any manager, for anyone. Because things are not as simple as they seem. Some details are essential in order to provide clarity, but some other details will confuse things more, especially if there's too many of them or if they're provided at the wrong time. And the challenge is how to know, how to decide which details should be communicated because they are important and which details should be left out because all they would do is overcomplicate the communication and therefore make it fail. The way I go about it is I look for details that are both essential and illuminating. Essential is straightforward, but by illuminating I mean details that once I communicate them, once you find out about them, they will paint a bigger picture in your head. It's not just that detail, they will make you understand something around that detail, something more about the context. So for example, if I were to say that me and a group of friends, we went for a day-long hike during the weekend in the mountains in the rain, and one of my friends was so over-prepared that he had an UV detector sensor on his cap connected to his phone, so he would get an alarm if he was being exposed to too much UV on a cloudy day, on a rainy day, and had a cap on. If I give you this detail, this is an illuminating detail because you get an idea about how my friend approaches these things, and you get an idea about what other gadgets he might have had. It tells you more about this person than if I just said something like he had a Deuter Futura 26 backpack. That's another detail, and it's correct, it's factually correct, but it's way less illuminating. It doesn't tell you much. From the contrary, it might actually confuse you. And why did you mention that? Mr. Wolf uses the same approach with,
Jimmy, we need to raid your linen closet. I need blankets, I need comforters, I need quilts, I need bedspreads. The thicker the better, the darker the better. No whites. Can't use them.
5. Using examples. When you can't define something in a synthetic way, try to give as many examples as possible such that you end up, quote-unquote, defining that thing through examples. For example, Mr. Wolf does this.
Jimmy, we need to raid your linen closet. I need blankets, I need comforters, I need quilts, I need bedspreads.
He gives 4 examples of similar things, and through that he helps the listener understand if there's a 5th thing that might also help. Because he gives a wide array of examples that paints a picture in the mind of the listener of what other things might work. So you define a thing without actually defining it in the strict sense of the word. So the next time you're having a problem defining something in a very scientific type of way, just give a lot of examples, give several examples, and say something like, and similar things at the end. And that might just be good enough, or maybe even better than a formal theoretical definition in some situations. And last but not least, number 6, acceptance criteria in natural language. We know what acceptance criteria means when it comes to formal requirements. But the same idea can and should be applied, and it's an extremely powerful instrument in natural language. Mr. Wolf does this brilliantly with.
So if a cop stops us and starts sticking his big snout in the car, the subterfuge won't last.
So with this part, he's saying, this is not what we're trying to achieve right now. This is more than we have time for. This is not the good enough we're going for. Don't do this. Ignore this. And with this,
But at a glance, the car will appear to be normal.
he's saying, this is what we're trying to achieve right now. This is the definition of good enough in our case, and this is what we need to get done. Generally speaking, when you tell someone to do something, you can do it in 2 ways. The first way is to describe the activity. Tell them the things they need to do.
I need you two fellas to do is take those cleaning products and clean the inside of the car. I'm talking fast, fast, fast. You need to go in the back seat, scoop up all those little pieces of brain and skull. Get it out of there. Wipe down the upholstery. Now, when it comes to upholstery, it don't need to be spick and span. You don't need to eat off it. Just give it a good once-over. What you need to take care of are the really messy parts. The pools of blood that I've collected, you gotta soak that shit up.
In most situations, we use both approaches, just like Mr. Wolf does. But please don't forget this second one, the acceptance criteria mentality. In natural language, it is extremely powerful and extremely underused. And that's about it when it comes to Mr. Wolf. You should watch the movie. Have a good one.